It's the end of the year and time for yet another head-to-head. This time we go in depth on the Audi S3 and BMW M140i. What's the 30 to 70 time? How do they compare from behind the wheel? And which one should you pick? Let's get into it. My name's Tom and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, before you whinge and go, oh, you can't compare the BMW M140i with the S3, the 140i is much quicker, you need to compare it to the RS3. Let me just put this in perspective for you. Like for like, that means same spec, age and mileage, the Audi S3 is still over 4 grand more than the M140i on average. So in my mind, comparing the much more expensive RS3 would just be silly really, wouldn't it? Plus, I wouldn't write off the S3 just yet. There's more than just numbers that make up this car. We'll get onto that in a min, but first, let's talk stats. The M140i uses the beastly B58 turbo inline 6. It puts out 340 horsepower and 500 newton meters of torque. That power goes to the rear wheels only via a ZF 8-speed torque converter gearbox. Then the S3, it's down on cylinders and power, but still a strong and highly tunable engine. This is the EA888 2-litre turbo. It has 306 horsepower and 380 newton meters of torque that goes to all 4 wheels via a 7-speed dual clutch gearbox. Now we know stats, let's see that 30 to 70 time, shall we? So as you can see, the M140i edged the S3 out by just a nose. However, that doesn't tell the whole story. It was a very wet day today, and that meant I had to do 3 runs in the M140i to get that time of 3.94 seconds. With cold tyres, this thing was nearly a whole 2 seconds slower, and it only did 5.26 seconds. The S3, while slower overall, with a time of 4.15 seconds, was able to do that time every single time. Yeah, the 30 to 70 was literally within milliseconds on each run. And I don't know about you, but sometimes having consistent performance can be better. Were it a dry day though, the M140i would walk it every single time. Now, before we hit the road, let's have a very quick look at the inside, as personally I think the Audi just about takes the cake here too. The leather quality is just a tad better, and the overall look of the interior is just a tad more appealing, I think. Anyway, let's get cracking, shall we? Right then, Audi S3 up first, and it's an Audi S3, so it's a fairly normal spec car. This one is quite nice actually, it's got B&O sound and stuff, but in terms of the car itself, we don't have the mag ride suspension. All we've got is basically bog standard Audi S3. So driving around town, it is very nice, very comfortable, very little to complain about. Suspension is on the sportier side, but it's really well refined, and that's something I'll get onto in the M140i section, because that's where this S3 is better in terms of refinement and overall ease of use. The S3 is definitely the better car, especially if you live in a city like London. It's just a bit more comfortable, shall I say. Seating position though is a little bit too high for my preference. I would prefer it if it was just a little bit lower. But yeah, steering's nice and light, and it's only 2 turns, lock to lock, which is really impressive. It's just a very easy car to drive. But then it's a hot hatch, so is that going to make it boring on a B-road? Well, we are going to find out in a second. But first, let's see what this thing is like to park. This is where Audis tend to be quite good. They're just kind of like always a bit square in shape. And if you live in London, it is nice to have a car that's kind of just easy to live with, really. The steering is the main thing though. It doesn't have a huge amount of feel, but it's a very fast rack, and it's a dynamic rack, so when you're going at slower speeds it's very responsive, but when you're going at higher speeds it's a little less responsive just so you don't end up putting this thing into a hedge. In terms of parking, yeah, you got plenty of steering angle. Again, getting from one lock to the other is very easy, and parking the thing is an absolute piece of cake if you are good at parking, which I'm clearly not. There we go, yep. So yeah, getting into a space in one go is actually easy. I'm just, not brilliant at parking. And then getting out is a piece of cake, as long as you've got the 5-door version, 3-door version, slightly longer doors, so you do sometimes have to be careful with that. But overall, a very easy car to get in and out of. Then coming out of junctions, see if start-stop works. This is usually the first thing I turn off in most cars. Okay, it's not going to turn on for me today. But half throttle out of a junction, quattro, all-wheel drive. Yeah, I mean, it's a wet, cold, very damp day, and it just puts the power down. So if you do like a car that can just put the power down, S3 is definitely going to be a bit better. And that is like one major plus, I'd say, is just coming out of junctions. You're never waiting for stuff to happen. What's this guy doing? He's just gone through a red light. Typical BMW driver. I definitely don't do that in my BMW. Anyway, let's reset the trip computer now, see what kind of MPG we can get on the motorway. I know I've done this test before with other S3s, but because I'm doing the comparison side by side with the 140, I want to make sure the environment, the test environment, is as similar as possible. So we've reset the trip computer now. This car will do about 45 mpg given the chance. Today is probably going to be quite a busy M25 because it's a Saturday, so yeah, unfortunately we might not get that figure, but I do just want the test environment to be the same. That's the GoPro failing again, so the dash GoPro is going to go out the window. Okay then, let's use our favourites button to get into dynamic, get the gearbox into sports as well, into manual. So we've got control of the gears, and let's put the traction control in sports as well. It's an Audi, we don't need any assists really, do we? Okay, and then being an Audi, you do just plant your foot and off you go. Little bit of understeer, roads are a bit the roads are a bit greasy, but you can't deny, for a little 2-litre engine, this thing has got some serious performance. It's that mid-range punch where it is genuinely quite impressive. Right then, motorway time. Let's get ourselves into efficiency now and see what kind of MPG we get. I do understand it's obviously not so much about the MPG figure, it's more about how many miles you can do to a tank. As having to visit the petrol station very often is a bit of a pain in the backside. Anyway, let's sit in traffic for a minute and then get onto the motorway, shall we? Right then, coming onto the motorway in efficiency mode. It does kill the throttle quite substantially, which is a bit of a shame. But I suppose it is trying to save you fuel, so yeah, as you can see, it shifts up gears as soon as it possibly can. And this is like nearly half throttle I'm giving it. And eventually it'll get up to speed. And once you are up to speed, you quickly realise this feels like a much more refined car than it should do. I mean, this is closer to a BMW 3 Series in terms of sound deadening than you would think. So yeah, get your cruise control on and you really can chill out in this thing. The suspension is absolutely fantastic on the motorway as well, really settled, and it's just an overall really easy car to do a lot of miles in. Very pleasant car to drive on the motorway. It's an Audi at the end of the day. It wants to sit at 155 miles an hour all day long, every single day of the week, and just sit in a straight line. Doesn't like corners so much, which I will demonstrate later. But yeah, visibility is very good. It's just that square shape. It just has so many advantages over that sort of rear-wheel drive setup, because you can just see more, It's just easier to drive, easier to live with. But then again, that might make it more boring. Before we find that out though, let's get onto the motorway and see what kind of MPG we can get out of this thing. There is a bit of traffic today, so I am going to cut both runs short, but on this slightly shorter run the S3 still managed 34.2 mpg, which is not that bad, and you can still see it's obviously still going up. Over a long run you will get around 40 if you sit with the cruise control on at 70 miles an hour. You can get 45 though. That's about the highest figure I've seen from this thing. Anyway, let's now get onto a B road and see if this thing handles well. Okay, in dynamic, gearbox in manual, traction in sports. Let's see what shapes we can cut with this thing. Lift off the throttle, it's typical Audi really, so you can get it a little bit sideways, but nothing too crazy will happen. And yeah, performance, undeniably quick. It's a fantastic engine, this, really. I mean, for a 2-litre engine, I'm still going to say it's probably one of my favourite. It just has this feeling of sheer power that not many other cars have. Alright, let's do a little sound check through here. Hopefully not too much wind noise. Little DSG fart, very nice. But it's just the confidence-inspiring grip that this thing gives you is monumental. Like, you just come around a corner like this and you just plant your foot and you don't have to think about it. It just gets the job done. However, in turn, I don't really have much of a smile on my face. You know, the sound is okay, you get a couple of burbles, maybe even a pop from the exhaust. And the chassis is, you know, it's just very pleasant, very easy to drive quickly. Gearbox does its thing, very snappy, not jerky at all actually, which is very impressive for a dual clutch system. But it's just, it's a bit timid, shall I say. Just a little bit timid. It just doesn't have that edge that I'm looking for in a hot hatch, which is a bit of a shame. Alright, brake test, 100-yard marker, slam on the anchors. Very confidence-inspiring brakes. And the turn-in as well is very good. Let's do another little sound check, shall we? From a slightly higher gear, maybe? Yeah. It's a 2-litre engine, isn't it? So it's not going to knock your socks off. But it's just that confidence-inspiring grip. Like coming around here, I mean, you really feel where the limit of grip is. And the thing is, it's quite high, but it does understeer quite quickly compared to its competitors. A lot of other hot hatches, you'll feel the rear squirming around a lot. The only way you can really get the rear out in this thing is if you lift off, oversteer, or if you Scandi flick it into a corner very aggressively. And it's not really a good idea to do that kind of stuff on a public road. Like, if you just lift off, it just kind of straightens out. So, yeah. It's alright. Where it is good though is down a tight British B road. Let's go to one now, and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, of course, still in dynamic, still got the traction off. Let's go. This is where the Audi S3 becomes a little bit of a weapon, because that very capable, very predictable chassis allows you to basically exploit every inch of performance from this thing. Like coming over bumps, it just deals with it very well. Very little to complain about at all. Hard on the brakes, chuck it in. It really is a cracking bit of kit. Okay, can we hit 60 before the corner? Let's go. I mean, obviously. A fairly easy feat. It's that B-road acceleration where this thing is just an absolute monster. No matter the surface, it just performs. And this is where a smile kind of does appear on your face a bit, because you really can just rag the absolute S word out of it and it doesn't complain at all. It's one of those cars you have to drive very quickly to get any kind of enjoyment out of it, which is kind of a good thing and a bit of a bad thing in a way. Okay, one last time. Oh, it's just so fast. Suspension deals with bumps unbelievably well on a B road. Gearbox just so sharp. I mean, yeah. Most bumps like that will really upset even very good hot hatches, but that's where Audi just does a little bit better. It's just a very composed car. But on the flip side, to upset it, you have to put in a lot of effort, which you don't necessarily want to do on a public road. Anyway, let's now jump into the 140i and see what we can do with that. Okay then, hopped in the M140, and before we crack on with the M140i side of things, I just want to say a massive thanks to everyone that's subscribed to the channel, liked the videos, left a comment. It is a massive help to us, and it allows us to do stuff like this. So yeah, it's been a fantastic year for us, and hopefully next year it will be even better, onto bigger and better things. Anyway, time to compare the 140i to the S3. Going around town, the first thing you notice is this is a quite significantly less refined car when it comes to its suspension, which is a shame, because a lot of the other things about the car are fantastic. Obviously you've got an awesome engine, but the suspension does let it down in stock form. It's weird. It's like the springs are quite stiff, but the dampers aren't able to control the body that well. So when you go over speed bumps, you get this kind of pogo effect. I don't know if you can see it in the GoPro, but basically, instead of the car settling when you go over a bump, it pogos up and down after you've already gone over the bump. The S3 doesn't do that. And if you're living with it on a daily basis, you notice it like straight away. Really, it is really obvious, even if you're not sort of super into cars. However, everything else about the car is very nice. Gearbox is very smooth. Obviously, instead of the dual clutch system you have in the S3, this has a torque converter, but it's the ZF 8-speed, which is probably one of the best transmissions on the market at the minute. It really is fantastic. Oh yeah, suspension is very stiff in this thing. Also, this car is a pristine condition M140. I think it's only done 32,500 miles, and the previous owner was in his 60s, so this car hasn't been through Bradford parts bin yet, which is brilliant. It is a very, very clean example, and yeah, I'm going to drive it slightly more gingerly than I usually would, just because it is a very nice car. We will get it a little bit sideways though, don't worry. But yeah, steering is nice and light round town. It's just a very well-rounded car, I'll say, whilst being quite unique. It's a unique proposition. It's a 6-cylinder turbocharged hot hatch, hatchback obviously, so you've got the boot, and it's rear wheel drive. It's the last one of its kind, which makes it quite special, and it's cheaper than the S3 still. The average S3 is going to be 3, 4, even 5 grand more than this with the equivalent specifications and mileage and year. So that leaves you about 3, 4, 5 grand to put parts on this thing, improve it. First thing I would do is get the XHP gearbox map. That's an absolute must for this thing. I will be doing that on my car very soon, and may even be filming a little bit of a build series with it on this channel. So if you want to see that, you're going to want to subscribe and follow along, as we might be doing that next year. Wink wink. But yeah, driving around town in comfort mode, it's very subdued, very quiet. You've just got that lovely purr of that inline 6. It's just buttery smooth. Really, really pleasant car to drive. Seating position is better than the S3 as well, although I have to say the seats themselves are definitely more comfortable in the S3. They don't hug you as much, but they're a little bit squishier, a bit more actual chair-like. These are definitely car seats, if you know what I mean. They hug you in a bit more. They are designed for a purpose, and you do feel that. You can adjust the bolsters as well. This car actually has electric seats, so you can adjust them electronically, which is a very nice thing, because any BMW owner out there that has manual seats will know they are terrible. They're on a release mechanism instead of a pump mechanism, which is faster, but it means you kind of have to do it while stationary, as if you want to raise your seat, you have to sort of lift yourself up, which can be a bit of a pain in the backside, especially if you're an older person. Anyway, in terms of parking, the M140 is a very easy car to park. You've got plenty of steering angle, visibility is fairly good. Not quite as good as the S3, I will say that, but it's still a small hatchback, and it's still pretty easy to park, I'd say. Nothing really to complain about. Steering's nice and light and comfort. Yeah, I mean, parking sensors are accurate. This car's got front and rear, which is an option, and yeah, there you go. Once you're in a space, very easy to get out the car. The only thing I kind of dislike with these is when the car's locked, you have to double pull the door to actually open it. I wish it would just open like the S3 does. That would be nicer. But yeah, it's just a very smooth car to drive around. The only thing I do notice is on the odd occasion you can catch the gearbox out a bit. It will sometimes kind of hesitate to do anything for a goodly while, actually. It doesn't always do it, but it does sometimes do it. Anyway, coming out of junctions, see if start stop's going to turn on. Nope. But half throttle, we're on Pilot Super Sports, so there is just no grip today, being cold and a little bit damp. And them being Pilot Super Sports, they are awful tyres compared to some of the newer stuff. I have Michelin PS5s on my car, and yeah, they are way better than the tyres on this thing. Anyway, let's reset our computer, see what kind of MPG we can get. I have seen 49.2 miles per gallon out of a 140i on a trip up to Wales. Admittedly, that was purely motorway driving, sitting at 60 to 70 miles an hour as I had stuff in the car. But that is bonkers when you think about it. A 340 horsepower hot hatch, 6 cylinders as well, 3 litre engine that can do 49 miles per gallon. Yeah, so we're going to see what kind of MPG we can get on the motorway. Before that, obviously, we're going to take it round and roundabout and have a little taste of the handling, see what it can do. But yeah, just another quick thing on the miles per gallon figure. On the motorway, it's very good. Round town, the S3 is definitely a bit more efficient because it's a 2 litre engine. It's just using less fuel, especially when you're idling. But on the motorway, this is a surprisingly efficient beast. And all we have to do today is beat 34.5 mpg, which I think we might actually manage. Anyway, enough waffling. Let's get onto a little roundabout and have a bit of fun. Right, in Sports Plus, I'm not going to go fully traction off, but traction control itself is off. Still got stability. Gearbox in Sports, in manual. this is where you start to notice more cylinders, more torque. Gearbox is so good as well. Just for a torque converter, it's just ridiculous how good these things are. Right then, oh, wait for this guy to go. Come on. Right, let's go. No traction, obviously, which means things get a little bit sideways, shall I say. Whee! But undeniably very fast still, even with a lack of traction. Already, it does sound quite a bit better, doesn't it? This is a completely stock exhaust, mind you. And, yeah, it sounds okay. It sounds throaty. It's just missing those really nice burbles. They are there, but they're just very muffled. That's why you got to do a res delete or get an aftermarket exhaust. But as a stock car, it still sounds pretty good. Very smooth. Right, I'm going to have to sit in traffic a bit again. And then let's get onto the motorway and see how this compares to the S3. See if it's just as comfy or a little less comfy, or maybe even more. In eco mode, coming onto the motorway then, this is where BMW a little bit better at calibrating things, I'd say. Their eco mode is just a bit smoother. It doesn't deaden the throttle quite as much, so if I give it a quarter of a throttle, it does downshift and does give you just a bit more torque. I mean, you do just have more torque as well anyway. This engine is just an absolute torque monster, even in stock form. It is fantastic. And it means when you come onto the motorway, you can just plant your foot and overtake everyone else. It's great. But yeah, cruise control, whack it on 70 miles an hour and you really can chill out. Engine sits at around 1600, 1700 RPM. Oh, it's just wonderful, it really is. But what isn't so wonderful is, again, the suspension. It never fully settles down, and it means when you're on the motorway you get this kind of jiggliness, this unsettledness to the ride that you don't get in the Audi, which is a shame, as road noise and wind noise are very low. Even on these tyres, Michelin Pilot Supersports are quite noisy compared to the newer stuff. But yeah, wind noise is very low, road noise is very low. I would say it's 95 to 98% as good as the Audi S3 is. Which is weird, because that means it's kind of similar to a BMW 3 Series. But it's BMW, they like doing weird stuff. They clearly spent way too much money making this car. I highly doubt they made as much of a profit as they did with their other models. Because yeah, it's rear wheel drive and it's got a big engine. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's still a very nice car to do long journeys in. It's just not quite as good as the Audi. The other thing that is better in the Audi as well is the sound system. The B&O system in that particular S3, as in that particular generation of S3s rather, is rather good. It is like genuinely one of the best systems out there. Really good bass, really clear, and because the car's well built, that particular generation, again, the newer one, not so much, but that particular generation does just have a really solid build quality to it, which means the sound system doesn't have any rattles, which is nice. But then you kind of forget about all that as soon as you turn into a corner and you feel this chassis move around beneath you. Anyway, before we have too much fun, let's get on the motorway and see what kind of MPG we can manage out of this thing. Proof is in the pudding. We did 39.2 mpg in very similar traffic conditions, and as you can see, it's still going up. Let me just zoom in for you there so you can have a quick look. There you go. So on the motorway, the 140i does seem to be a little bit more efficient. And I think that's just because it's got 8 speeds, it's sitting at a lower RPM, and it's just naturally got a lot more torque for a car that doesn't weigh that much. So yeah, on longer motorway journeys, I think the 140 is actually the better car to have, even though the S3 is a little bit more comfortable. Anyway, let's go and have a proper drive in this 140i. Right, into Sports Plus, gearbox into manual. That is a recipe for fun. I really like as well how when you're in Sports Plus, it just knows you want the traction control off. Fantastic feature, that. Right, let's have a ganders. And that's what the 140i is about. Oh, power! Yeah, even above 70 you can get the back end out of this thing quite easily. Obviously, can't go above 70, gotta be good. But it's just the torque. Like, if I slow down to 60, just 6th gear, just plant your foot. It just builds speed. It's like a freaking freight train. Brakes, yeah, they're not quite as good as the S3, I'd say. They're probably more capable, but the feel isn't quite as good. Right, stock M140 sound. What does it sound like? Pretty good, I'd say. Definitely better than the S3, although that's a given because it's got more cylinders, and more cylinders usually means more better. Steering, in terms of feel, is definitely better. Weight is nicer as well. This thing's just all over the place, man. Absolutely all over the place. Suspension. Do you know what? When you're going faster, it's not too bad. It still just has that jiggliness to it, though, which isn't great. But it's not the worst. I would say the S3 just feels a bit more stable, though. I think that's where a lot of owners have complaints. They go from something like a Golf R to this, and they get really scared of it because A, it's kind of a bit more intimidating, and B, it's just not quite as refined, shall I say. It's a bit more brutal. But you can tell by the tone of my voice, the smile on my face, it's just more fun to drive. It just is. It's rear-wheel drive, it's got more cylinders, it sounds better. It's just a fact. It really is. And the car's there to catch you, if you're in Sports Plus at least. If you turn DSC all the way off, which I wouldn't recommend doing unless you really know what you're doing, it does get quite leery, and because you've got an open differential, if one wheel lifts, you do find that it just completely cuts the power, because obviously it's trying to send power to the wheel with the least resistance, so it sends it to the wheel that's in the air, which doesn't really help. It is like an E-diff, so it will grab the brakes even with the DSC fully off to try and mimic a proper diff, but it's nothing close really to a proper mechanical limited slip differential. These tyres just have no grip in winter. Oh god, I do love these cars though. I mean, that's why I bought them. But yeah, I'd say the S3, it's easier to drive fast than this, but less rewarding. So if you're an inexperienced driver, I'd actually say the S3 is probably going to be more enjoyable for you because it's just easier. You know, it's a point and shoot kind of car. Whereas this, you do have to kind of know what you're doing a bit more. I mean, you can see there's a lot of people bin them quite a lot. But when you get it right in this thing, oh god, does it feel good. How does it compare down a tighter British B road though? There's plenty of them in the UK. Let's go to one now and see what it's like. Okay then, let's have a ganders again, but this time on a slightly smaller road. Wheel spin, more wheel spin, more wheel spin. It makes it good fun. Whee! Oh, cyclist, slow down. Oh, wow. Yeah, so Michelin Pilot Supersports, as you can see, don't have much grip, do they? So yeah, down a smaller road, you do have to be quite careful, shall I say. Planting your foot is a rare occasion in this thing. But oh, is it a lot of fun. Okay, can we hit 60 before the corner? Let's go. Wheel spin. More wheel spin. And we still hit 60. Nailed it. And yeah. It just makes you laugh because it's just ridiculous. On a more serious note, suspension, yeah, it's fine. It's still not quite as good as the S3, in my opinion. It leaves the road a little bit, but the actual placement of the car itself is a bit easier. And yeah, it's still very predictable. Right, one last time. Wheel spinning. People crash these things because they just don't know what they're doing. Fundamentally, it's still a fairly good handling car. It's quite a way off being a very good handling car, or actually just a good handling car, but it's okay. I think a lot of people buy these expecting them to be like full fat M cars, and they're just not. They need a lot of work, and even then, they're still not going to be a full fat M car. But as a hot hatch, oh god, it's a unique and very delicious proposition, and cheaper than an S3, like for like. So what's not to like? I mean, again, proof is in the pudding. I bought one of these because it's unique, because it's fun, and it's just interesting. Even though it's a popular car, I mean, it's popular for a reason at the end of the day. It's like the Fiesta ST. Everyone hates on it a lot, but fundamentally, it's better than a lot of other hot hatches. And it's the same thing with the M140i. It just needs a bit of money spending on it, and you've got yourself an absolute weapon that can still be a very nice, comfortable, fairly calm daily driver. So yeah, overall, it's got to be the M140i for me every single day of the week. That's not to say though that the S3 doesn't have its place. Remember, this is my personal opinion. So if you do want a slightly more comfortable daily that is just fast and will perform come rain or shine, you know, 30 to 70 time within the 5-second range on a wet day in a 140i. When it's dry, obviously it's quicker, but yeah, if you want that 4.15 seconds every day of the week, it's the S3. And some people do prefer that, but if you're a proper driver and you know what you're doing, this is the one you want. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, give it a like, and why not subscribe, as not only can you see more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which actually includes both the cars in this video. This particular M140i is a very nice example. It's got electric heated seats. The electric part of those seats, very rare, don't see that very often. It's also got the Harman Kardon sound system, obviously, because it's a Shadow Edition car. And it's done 34,500 miles, and there's not a single mod on it. As I said before, it hasn't been through the Bradford's part bin. Same thing with the S3. The S3 is very nice. It's got B&O sound, it's got heated seats. It's just a lovely car. Links for both cars will be down in the description. If the links aren't there, sorry, but you missed it. The car has sold. Anyway, my name's Tom. I hope you all had a good Christmas, and I'll see you guys in the new year. Bye bye.